choruses in the front end of the song.
Right.
Then they go to the guitar solo. Then they, and that's the sort of normal structure for them. And so it's a little bit different. I've learned a lot more, and I needed to change things up a bit, because for me, my enthusiasm is very important to my ability to make a half decent record.
Right.
So,
well, and it's something you've been doing your whole career, because I've seen lots of interviews where you said that you're, sort of just sick of the standard rock band setup as well, where you've done that. And
that's only now. Yeah, that's only now, because
no, exactly.
I don't, when I was starting, certainly when I got my break, there were so many different sort of sounds of bands, and this has been my one dilemma, that weird thing that when there is very little choice, everyone sounds different. Now we have the most choice in the world, everyone's records sound the same, and I don't quite understand how that came to be.
Interesting. Well, so let's go back to the beginning, because I'm curious about some stuff. So, born in England, in Surrey. You played bass. Yep. You had a brother who's a musician as well, because you worked with his band, right?
I did.
So you were in school, doing school things. That was not necessarily the right place for you, and the school helped point out that maybe it wasn't the best fit, right?
Yeah. I was not the sort of guy. I was not that guy. If you look at the school, well, two things. I was not the guy always fiddling with transistor radios and doing that. And I was not very good at school. I was like near the bottom. I was just a dreamer, I suppose. And I've always been a dreamer and my head in the clouds in some way, but I've always thought I was normal as well. And it's only when I look back upon my life that I realize that maybe, I mean, I don't know what normal is really, but I've always thought I was normal. But when I look back and I go, well, you've done things that are not really normal, so it just seemed natural for me to spend all my time in a recording studio.
Right.
And I was very lucky to be at a very fertile time.
But before you actually got into the studio, because you didn't, from what I've seen, like when you left school, it's not like you had seen a recording studio and you knew about making records necessarily and like, okay, well, this is what I want to go pursue. I mean, you just thought, well, I like music, right?
Yeah, I know I like music. I got a friend of a friend, and my dad helped, got me to go and look at a recording studio. I said, are there any jobs going? And the studio manager said, wow, just so happens that today someone has decided to leave. I'll give you an interview, come back, instead of going through the sort of 10 applicants that they used to get every week. And I all I remember from the interview was he asked me one question, was, should a recording studio be live or dead? And I cannot remember what I said, because there really isn't an answer to that, because the answer is, well, it depends what sort of records you want to make.
Well, exactly. but what a funny thing to ask.
I know. But my very first day, I remember being, okay, so the setup was, it was the last studio in the country, or probably the world, that had a studio and a control room and a mixing and a tape room, right? So the band would play in the studio, the control room was where they would do the mixing, and I was in room B, it was called. And there was a swan neck microphone on the desk, and I had a little Auratone next to my ear, and I was sat at the 24 track. So basically the producer would say, okay, do a take, or let's say a punch in, it was called a cue to press. So it was cue to press from the second verse on track 14. So I would click track 14, go just before the second verse. And when they said play, I would play. And then the producer would say to the engineer, press. And the engineer would was saying to the microphone, press. And I would punch in. It was so fucking anal, I tell you. And it was ridiculous.
And so this is Phonogram Studios in London, right? Which was owned
Yeah.
by Polygram. Is that right? It was like the
Yeah, Polygram had just taken over. It was Philips before that,
right.
And when it was Philips, it had quite a good reputation as a very live studio. They did all the Dusty Springfield records there,
Right.
and the Walker Brothers. These big sort of British cavernous sounds, and then the studio was sort of, you know, the thing was to make it as dead as possible, and it didn't really have much life to the studio, which is great if you want those sort of really tight Bee Gees type sounding records. But whenever I tried to make that sort of a drum sound, it just sounded small. It didn't sound fat and in your face. I don't know how those people get those
No,
drums.
because I mean that is a 70s, and it's definitely a 70s British thing, and there's some amazing records. The earlier Pink Floyd, the Pato records, some of those things, super dry but gigantic in a way.
Yeah. But I don't know how to make those. You know, I always call it a Huntley and Palmer's drum sound. You know, like biscuit tins. That's
right. So when you started in 1972, there was already 24 track.
Yes, I think they got the 24 track about 6 months before I joined.
Right. And you were there.
They'd upgraded from the 16.
So you're there for 5 years, which once we get out of these 5 years, we're going to start flying. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about sort of what kind of sessions were going on, because you must have done a huge amount of stuff in 5 years at a studio like that. But at the same time, you're not in the control room. You don't get to see other people engineer. You only get to engineer sort of on weekends when you're allowed in. So how did